Welcome, deep divers. Today, we're really digging into something quite unique. It's an accountability report that, well, it challenges how we usually talk about major systemic harms.
hmm
You know, environmental, social, tech, economic,
hmm
the big ones.
Right. And the core mission, as I understand it, is pretty radical in its simplicity.
Yeah, it's about directly naming the big corporate players, the financial institutions, even specific individuals behind the problem.
Exactly. Because so often reporting uses these blanket terms.
Like what?
Well, things like the fossil fuel industry or big tech. It sounds critical, but it obscures who actually made the decisions.
Ah, okay, so it kind of disperses the blame.
Precisely. It creates this sort of impunity. If no one's named, no one's truly held accountable. This non-naming lets the key decision makers off the hook.
Okay, let's unpack this then. This report insists on precision,
Yeah.
naming names, putting numbers on the harm, cutting through that evasive language. So you're going to hear exactly who this report is pointing fingers at, no more generalizations. Let's maybe start with fossil fuels and climate destruction. That seems like a big one.
Definitely. And it's a prime example. We always hear corporate actors involved in climate change.
Right, very generic.
But this report, it gets specific. It names ExxonMobil,
Okay.
and it points to individuals. Lee Raymond, Rex Tillerson, Darren Woods,
For what specifically?
for alleged roles in climate denial strategies, greenhouse gas emissions, the Valdez spill, obviously, and pollution in places like Louisiana's Cancer Alley.
Wow, okay, that's direct.
And it's not just Exxon, it names Chevron too. David O'Reilly, John Watson, Michael Worth, citing things like Amazon pollution and using SLAPP suits.
SLAPP suits.
Yeah, lawsuits intended to intimidate critics. And Shell is in there too. Ben Van Beurden, Whale Sawan, linked to Niger Delta pollution, and that OPL 245 corruption case.
And you were saying this level of detail is unusual.
Very. The report highlights something interesting. Roughly half of critical analyses still avoid naming specific executives, even when discussing deliberate strategies like climate denial.
So it's not just media glossing over it. Even deeper analyses sometimes miss this.
Seems so. It suggests how ingrained this idea of the faceless corporation really is. It masks the actual human decisions driving these huge problems.
That really hits the report's main point, doesn't it? Okay, let's shift gears. What about surveillance capitalism and tech-driven harm?
Another area filled with general terms like platforms or social media giants.
Yeah, you hear that all the time.
So the report names Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, Javier Olivan, Joel Kaplan.
And the connection.
Surveillance-based profits, their platform's alleged role in the Rohingya genocide, amplifying hate speech.
Right, and Google?
Alpha Google, yeah. Sundar Pichai, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, cited for massive data collection, potential bias in search results, and how YouTube algorithms might fuel extremism.
And the report found a similar naming gap here.
A big one. It claims something like 80% of initial reports often leave out the full legal names of the responsible corporate officers.
Yeah.
Just gone.
Wow. Okay, so we have fossil fuels, tech. What about the money behind it all, the financial enablers?
Good transition, because again, we usually just hear global banks. This report names JP Morgan Chase, for instance, and Jamie Dimon
Why them?
for being arguably the biggest financier of fossil fuels globally. The report cites around $869 billion in financing just between 2016 and 2024.
$869 billion. That's a lot.
It is. And they're not alone. Citigroup under Jane Fraser, Bank of America with Brian Moynihan, Wells Fargo under Charles Scharf, all named as top funders.
And it's not just banks, right? What about asset managers?
Right, like BlackRock and Lawrence D. Fink, or Vanguard with Salim Ramji. They're mentioned for holding huge amounts of fossil fuel assets, sometimes despite making ESG commitments.
ESG being environmental social governance.
Exactly. And the report points out that over 90% of financial news coverage tends to skip naming the CEOs or board chairs here. It treats asset management as if it's just passive.
When it's actually directing capital, actively making choices.
That's the argument, yeah.
This report seems incredibly comprehensive. Does it cover other areas too?
Oh yeah, briefly touches on agribusiness and ecosystem destruction. Names Cargill, for instance, connecting them to deforestation and human rights issues, and JBS for Amazon deforestation.
And the pattern continues.
Consistently. It also looks at defense, militarization, and private violence. Think Raytheon and weapons sales to Yemen, or Blackwater Constellas and mercenary abuses.
And the naming gap there.
The report claims it's huge key individuals omitted in maybe 95% of reporting in those sectors. It also flags influence machines, like the American Petroleum Institute or the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, for blocking regulations.
So across the board, energy, tech, finance, agriculture, defense, there's this persistent failure to name the key people and institutions.
That's the core finding. The report argues this architecture of impunity, as they call it, exists because of these naming gaps, and closing them consistently is crucial for any real justice or systemic change.
So wrapping this up, what's the main takeaway for you, the listener? I guess it's about giving you the power to look past those vague headlines, to see where responsibility might actually lie.
To connect decisions to decision makers.
And it leaves us with a pretty provocative thought, doesn't it?
It does.
What might actually change if every analysis, every news report consistently and directly named the specific individuals and institutions behind these huge systemic harms instead of falling back on those broad, safe, evasive terms? Makes you think.